And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. You might well wonder whether entrepreneur simply means a person who starts a business and is willing to risk loss in order to make money, or whether it carries an additional connotation of farsightedness and innovation. We begin today's Open Connection with founder and creator of N2N, Lisa Mueller.
So I'm from the Silcotin Nation, out of Williams Lake. Lived with my granny west of Williams Lake, about 40 minutes in Risky Creek. My mom and dad, we went and lived with her, and lived with her for about 10 years of our life until she passed away. But yeah, grew up with my granny and then finished high school in Williams Lake. Yep.
So after high school, what did you decide to do for a career?
So right out of high school, I left Williams Lake just after I was 18 and moved to Kelowna, where my sister was, and was just, I shouldn't say just, but I was a cashier down there. So I worked in a cold beer and wine in a gas station and in just an outlet store. Always was a cashier. I loved being a cashier. What brought you up north? So came up into northern BC in 2008 as a banker. So I eventually went into banking. And was doing mortgage loans, so that's where I started off. Was doing mortgage brokering, and came up into Terrace in 2008 as a mortgage broker, and that's where I started off here in Terrace, BC, and got to know the North.
Say, why did you think N2N? Did you see a gap that was happening, or it was kind of like, where did this idea come out of?
So back in 2015, when I was working for Futurepreneur and so forth, I was privileged to be able to go to Vancouver to conferences, to business conferences and so forth. And they sent me down to one back in June 2015. Vancouver Board of Trades was doing this conference called How to Do Business with Aboriginal People. And so I attended that in 2015. And the whole topic, theme, agenda was around how we can do better business with Aboriginal people. But when I attended it, there was about 500 people in the room, and there was no Indigenous people in the room. So I noticed like a handful of Indigenous people, and then on the agenda of about 20 plus speakers, there was maybe one Indigenous person speaking. So I said, what is going on here? Something's wrong with the picture that we're talking about how to better do business with Aboriginal people and how to talk about economic development, but that needs to be from an Indigenous person and Indigenous leaders and an Indigenous perspective. And that conference it didn't have it. So I came home back up to Terrace and called my team, and it was like, we need an Indigenous forum where we highlight Indigenous leaders and allow them to come to the stage and tell us how to do better business with them in their territories, because who other than them to be telling us how we should be doing business in their territories? I don't think any outsiders should be doing that. So that's why the whole development and foundation of N2N was to create that Indigenous-led, Indigenous safe space, just to allow Indigenous leaders to come and own the stage and say, hey, this is how you do business with me. I'm just creating the space. It's for them to show up and tell us how to do better business with them. I'm creating the stage, the environment, the event for all of us to gather annually here in Terrace. And it's just for those that want to show up and just share their vision of leadership.
Now, of course, just coming up with the idea and a thought is, oh yeah, anyone can do that. But then you started doing the logistics. Did it become overwhelming for you?
Not overwhelming, because I have an amazing team at N2N that really works hard behind the scenes. And it's them that can take my vision and create it on the ground. So I had a vision and a reality that I wanted to bring to life, but I needed an amazing team to do that. And so lots of logistics, of course, as you know, behind events. And I thought when I started it, I'll be doing it for a few years, but here we are. I keep saying to my team, I cannot believe we're going into the 7th annual N2N Forum here in Terrace this October, 17th, 18th, 19th. And for the first time since 2019, it is returning back to its original format of 3 days. So we haven't done this since 2019. In 2019, I was feeling really good about the event because I'd finally worked out its kinks. Because they say when you start events, it takes a good 5 years, 3 years before you'll even realize, is this going to work? Is your format working? And also tweaking your format to where you're happy with it. Because those first few years, you're stumbling through trying to create a good event. And I feel more than ever, this 7th year coming in and returning back to its original format. 2019, we thought it was really good. But I think 2023, this fall, for the 7th annual, I think it's going to be more than better. I think we're getting there as good event planners after 7 years. It's only going to get better.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. It is difficult to generalize the definitions of Indigenous rights because of the diversity among First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Canada. Broadly speaking, however, Indigenous rights are inherent collective rights that flow from the original occupation of land that is now Canada and from the social orders created before the arrival of Europeans to North America. Let us return to the conversation as Lisa shares why creating a space for open dialogue is important.
I knew back in 2015 that the conversation, people were dying to have that conversation, because late 2010, definitely to 2015, that's when Indigenous issues and views became more magnified more than ever, with everything going on and the Silcotin winning their case in 2016. Everybody wanted to know, what does Indigenous engagement and reconciliation and all of that look with Indigenous leaders? So I knew the space was needed there for the conversation. And now here in 2023, we see it more, not so much as the norm, but it's happening. And so, and now it's a duty to, and a requirement under the UNDRIP and DRIPA and all of that, to have these conversations and this to be part of your normal business here in Canada and in British Columbia. So in 2015, when I created the first N2N that fall, I only had a small venue up at the Terrace Sportspark, but it sold out in like a couple of weeks. We sold all our tickets. So I knew then the conversation, the space needed to be there for this conversation. And from then, it's only exceeded what I've expected of it. And it's really built by my sponsors and those that buy the ticket to show up and attend, because without people attending and without our sponsors, you couldn't, it's all them helping create this space, because it's all of us together allowing this space to be created, because that's what it's built on, is the attendees and those sponsors that believe in this conversation.
And because of things like UNDRIP coming in and dictating, how businesses have to work with Indigenous people on their land, do you see a change in the business mindset from like when you were down in Vancouver, where they were kind of dictating things, to now it's almost a partnership?
A mandate, partnership. Oh yes, it's very much changed. I feel like the table has turned quite around. I don't know if we're quite there. We still got a lot of work to do, but I think we've come a long way in these past 7 years. Oh yeah, and then having COVID and all of that in there and returning to all of this, I think more than ever, just Indigenous leaders are leading their community how they want to govern, how they want economic development, how they want to major projects. I think individually nations are doing an amazing job and doing amazing work out there with their leadership.
And of course, one of those things that needs to be done is we need to bring our Indigenous leaders, business and also on the reservations. One of your keynote speakers, I remember a while back, was out of Osoyoos. And how were you able to, sell them to come and be a keynote speaker at your event?
Chief Louis. Yeah, he was like one of my highlights. Yeah, he was a big deal. Gosh, that must have been 2018, I think. Yeah. And that was when I knew that I had built a good reputation with N2N to be able to bring someone like him as my keynotes. And from then, it's just always so exciting to share with the keynotes my vision of Nation to Nation and why I created it, and then just the reputation to them feel comfortable and safe enough to come be the keynote at N2N, and then especially come to Terrace with us. Like, that's the whole reason I built this format and this platform at the Forum, was to bring amazing keynotes up into northern BC, to just make it feel like we're worthy enough to have these amazing speakers come and gather with us for 2-3 days and share their vision of leadership on any level. And the reason I bring other leaders into Terrace is to just show the success they're going through in their nation in another part of BC. Because each nation has got their own unique projects and their own unique challenges, and sometimes just hearing other successes and what others are doing, that sometimes sparks ideas in our own leadership. So that's why I just love bringing keynotes up, to let them share the vision with us, whoever's in the room.
And of course, one of those things that we're all learning together, and you can say with business and Indigenous peoples, nations working together, and there's almost, we have to go back to an understanding of where we're coming from. Last year you did something kind of unique, where you actually highlighted something that a lot of people had not known about, and that was with residential schools. How do you think that event turned out with that theme?
I really wanted to highlight the importance of why we're talking so much about residential school, the 215, the Pope apologizing, because that's all part of reconciliation and economic reconciliation and so forth, and it plays a big part on where Indigenous leaders are and Indigenous people are right now today. And in order to understand that, we also need a bit of education as to how we ended up as Indigenous people where we are today. The timeline of going through all the dark things that Indigenous people had to go through in regards, and that includes the residential school. So there's a big timeline to just help educate and help people understand. I don't know if they'll ever really understand like what Indigenous people have gone through to get to where we are, and why is the Pope apologizing, and why are we finding these dead children in the back of schools. So I think there's a really important piece that has to be told with economic development and economic reconciliation and all of this. It has to be part of the conversation, because it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's also important to understand, like, why are we here? Yeah, because lots of people think we're like just poor Indigenous people, like, you know, we're looking for an apology, but there's a whole other dark history that needs to be explained. And I see that more and more coming out in business and books, and people coming forward to tell their story, and just this discovery of all this 215 has opened up a wound that Canada knew was there but didn't want to talk about. So we're on the verge of talking about it, and we got a long ways to still talk about it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The University of Victoria is the oldest post-secondary institution in British Columbia. First established in 1903 as Victoria College, an affiliated college of McGill University, it gained full autonomy and degree granting status in 1963. Let us return to the conversation as Carolina shares why she joined Nation and Nation team.
I grew up in the Shuswap, near Salmon Arm, BC, in a place called Tappan, so a little bit more rural, but close to there in the Shuswap area.
And so, what did you decide to do with your life after school?
Oh goodness! I did a full switch. I was super into arts and dance, and I almost went down the professional ballet route. And then in high school, actually after being homeschooled for most of my life, I found out I'm actually good at science stuff. So I went to UVic and did a science degree, a biology degree. Okay. Not really knowing what I was going to do with that.
No, but it was something you found fascinating.
I could do, and I was told I was decent at it, so I thought, okay, let's do that. And
So now you have this newly inked diploma, and you go, what do I do?
Exactly. And so I didn't do anything with it. I went to Germany, which is where my roots are, and where I was born, but not where I grew up. And so went there, and then through sort of a route that took me into the health sciences a bit, I ended up meeting my partner, my husband now, and went on to university there and went more into environmental sciences. I then went more into adult education, so I had this science background and environmental background, which does relate to nation because my environmental governance degree is all about the different stakeholders that are involved when we're talking about humans' interaction with the environment. So that's really pertinent to natural resource development and economic development, and speaks to what Lisa is doing with bringing, the traditional people of the land together with the government that's in power and industry. So it relates to that. But yeah, took me a while to kind of get to meet Lisa, but I went into adult education for a long time and did that.
Tell me about when you met Lisa and how was she able to wrangle you in to being her team?
Oh wow, I don't think that was very hard, hey Lisa. You didn't have to try.
I think Sarah did it.
She didn't have to try very hard. So I met Sarah, who has been working with Lisa since 2019, and she's our event lead, and she's really amazing at all the logistics. I met her through our children, and we became friends. And the first time she told me about Nation to Nation and what Nation to Nation's vision is, I was really like, wow, I really resonate with that. And then, yeah, I guess they were looking for somebody. They needed more people on the team. And so Sarah set up a meeting with myself and Lisa and her, and we just had coffee. And then when I heard some of the things that Lisa's told you today about why she started Nation to Nation, what her vision is and where she comes from, I was just like, yeah, I need to be a part of what this woman and these amazing women on the team are doing. So it wasn't very hard at all. So I was just like, I didn't even talk about any logistics. I was just like, okay, tell me when I start. Like, I want to be part of the team. I don't really care what I'm getting into here. I just want to be part of it.
So yeah. What was your first task that you were given at the event?
So my role that I started with and that I'm still in, because it's only been, I guess, a good half year, 7 months or so, is to take on a role doing sponsorship. So I do sponsorship, and I also do a bit of the partnership sort of management. So I talk to sponsors, I reach out to people, I build relationships with them. I'm a little bit of, I guess, an N2N salesperson in a way, because as Lisa was mentioning, the sponsors are the backbone of making the vision into a reality, right? They're super important. We need everything from big industry, of course, because they have such an important role in the economy and they need to be on board with this. So we need those that are committed to come forward. But also we try to highlight smaller businesses and provide places where we can feature small businesses, local businesses to the area. Because yeah, a big part of what Lisa's doing has always been to also focus on the Northwest, on our area, to make sure that we're providing spaces and places for them to be seen and heard.
You need to really buy into the sponsorship and really make this thing happen. Do you find it a little easier because of what Lisa's been doing and trailblazing?
Oh, I mean, I think that there's definitely a strong brand and a strong recognition of Nation to Nation at this point. I don't know if the fact that it has been in Vancouver has really made a big difference to me selling the event. I think just the fact that it's endured this long, that it's a sold out event every year, that it does get all the support from big industry to the Indigenous leaders. There's lots of easy selling points. So it's been, yeah, I think Lisa's definitely paved the way for this to keep on going and keep on being successful.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The concept of economic resilience includes two key components. The first is the ability of economy to withstand or absorb an economic shock. The second is a more dynamic component, which relates to the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and strengthen their ability to respond to potential future shocks. In this final segment of Open Connection, Lisa and Carolina discuss this year's Nation to Nation theme.
This brings us to this year, to the 7th annual Nation to Nation Forum in Terrace, BC, happening October 17, 18, 19, returning to our regular 3-day format. And this year our theme is building economic resilience. So really focus on resilience this year, just because of the space we are in society and globally and economically on all levels. Lots of things that don't look hopeful in the world, but yet lots of things that are going good in the world. So really pulling this year's theme together and form for Terrace is exciting, and it's going well. We always have a limited tickets to our event because of our venues, so we sell out at the forum all the time. It sells itself because it is going into its 7th year, but really some of the topics we'll be covering is global economic overview, really looking for an economist to tell us where we are globally on all levels economically, and just where's the hope in all of this with the high interest and inflation and the cost of living. We're just not in a good space.
But there is always hope and opportunity, right? And I think that's a big thing that we're trying to highlight is where's the opportunity when you're in a downturn.
And then what's happening in northern BC, what's next for the BC forestry, opportunities in a downturn, diversifying energy, and then just where are we at with LNG in Canada. And those are some of the topics we're going to, and then opportunities facing Canada's mining right now, just really hitting all those topics over those 3 days. And really at this year's format, really trying to highlight northern BC and especially Terrace and area where we're hosting this 3 days on the traditional territories of the Kitsum-Kalum and the Kitsalis nations, and just really trying to push our attendees out into the communities. So on Wednesday, the whole afternoon, we're giving the conference attendees the day off in regards to, not the day off, but the opportunity to go to the nations on community tours to Haisla, to the Nass, to Kitsalis, to Kitsum-Kalum, to check out what Terrace has to offer, opportunities in Terrace, because a lot of our attendees at the conference, they come from out of our province. They come from Ontario, Alberta, just different areas, and some of them, it's their first time to Terrace. So really want to highlight what Terrace has to offer for those that attend the conference, and really push them out and about and to get to know northern BC a bit more.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, this year we did it at the women's gathering. We had a vendor area, and we're going to do that, right? So that's a new thing that's coming to the forum this year. So we have vendors, and that'll be a sort of a range from some of our sponsors and industry leaders to have a presence, but also to highlight local entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, and smaller businesses, artisans, which is something we might expand and have a bigger sort of trade show aspect to the event in the future. Yeah, and from my perspective on sponsorship, the question of how the event is going is also, it's going really well, and we have sort of a group of really loyal sponsors that have always supported the event, and they're back on board, but we're also getting interest from all over, and so we have from big to small industry and businesses supporting, but we still also need lots of support. So there's still space, and we still have a really awesome sponsorship package, and it's great if people want to reach out and get involved and become part of the team.
I know we talk about doing the annual women's gathering and keeping it in northern BC, just to have us who locally live up here attend these kinds of things and just feel ownership of.
And that did happen. I mean, it was so amazing, especially when Jody Wilson-Raybould spoke, because she did have all these connections here too, family connections and other things, and it was just really inspiring for local women, like you said, not to have to spend thousands flying somewhere to attend some fancy gathering in Vancouver, but we had it right here.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but that connects from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.